Is a war machine on this Saya. Well, a double kill, make it a triple kill here for Altec. CLG goes for the engage. The pick in now, is it enough? Only hits on the one. There's the pullback. And it is taken by Dignitas. Here comes the team fight. Big damage, and Dardoch goes down right away. Over the wall they go with the re-engage. Here comes the squad, but they've got Froggen. There's the laser, and Broken Blade goes down again. Look at this hook. He's so good! Move over! And the kick as well. Might find some more kills. Johnson's dead now as well.
Kill while he's farming a camp. That's the card that's special. He's going back in! Goes back in! This is it. And he's out! Absolutely out of play.
Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of the Rift Rewind. This is an ESPN League of Legends program. We are live on Twitch, on the ESPN app, on YouTube, and on Twitter as well. My name is Ardo Cal. I'm your host that does the most, but we got a special guest in studio. Take a look at this. He's back, ladies and gentlemen. Jacob Wolf. Ow! How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I'm
happy to see you here.
I know. I had to take a few weeks. Was tired, but also had a bunch of stuff to work on otherwise. But I'm glad to be back in Bristol, Connecticut. I don't know how many people say that, but nonetheless, I'm glad to be back in Bristol, Connecticut. I'm glad to be here on this show. Love this program and put a lot of time into this program. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, you certainly have behind the scenes as well. By the way, let's just notice the esteemed look here. We should put Esquire at the end of your name. Nice shoes there and socks. Let's put a dub in the chat, in the Twitch chat for Jacob's wardrobe. And by the way, speaking of Twitch chat, we will be monitoring it all show long. You got some questions, you got some thoughts, you want to be part of the conversation, we allow you to do that on this program. This is an inclusive environment to allow you to be part of the fun. And we have a lot of fun planned for you throughout this program. Of course, Los Angeles will be joining us as well. Emily Rand, Tyler Erzberger standing by. But we got a lot to talk about. Not much happened this week, actually. It was a very light week of...
No, there's certainly definitely not a North American team that's lost, or win streak got broken. And there's not another one whose loss streak is magically going away now, apparently, too. So,
yes.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about, I think.
A lot to talk about. And what we're actually going to do is we are going to break from convention. We actually will flip the script around on the program. We're actually going to start with the LEC.
We have heard your feedback.
For those friends in Europe that wanted the LEC talk a little bit earlier, that's exactly what we're doing. So without further ado, let's take a look at the results from the past weekend in the LEC. G2 had a terrific weekend. Hot on the heels were Origen. Hot on the heels were Fnatic. And guess what? G2 was able to vanquish them both, Jacob.
I know, it's a big week for G2, right? I think after a couple of the losses and some sloppy play a few weeks ago, that everybody was sort of selling all of their G2 stock, right? Everybody bought last year and then the market was crashing for them. But I think that it showed that this week that they are truly what they say they are, and give them a little bit of time, man. Give them some slack. It's easy when a team dominates in 2019 like G2 to have very high expectations, and rightfully so. But
as we take a look at the
everybody makes a little bit of a mistake. Everybody makes a little bit of a mistake. So, you know what? Good for G2. They're back on track. I do think that Origen and Fnatic are still very competitive,
yes.
But G2 is still the best team in Europe.
That Origen defeating Misfits there for me is very telling. Also, Rogue beating Mad Lions. There was a couple of matchups, impressive victories for teams that are really battling for that second place position. There was a little bit of separation there, particularly for Origen beating Misfits, since they're so close in the standings. We'll talk about that later.
I think the big thing here, right, looking at the results from this week, it shows that there's a little bit of, in my opinion, that there's a little bit of the tier list, right? I think that G2 is probably still the best team in Europe, and then below them is Fnatic and Origen. Below them is Rogue and Misfits, and below them is everyone else, right? And Mad Lions leads the rest of everyone else, in my opinion. But the standings are pretty telling, I think, right now. You see them grouped together in the way that they are. The standings are indicative, which we don't always see that in a lot of leagues, but we certainly do here.
It seems appropriate is the word that I would use looking at these standings. G2 on top, Origen, Fnatic, and Hot Pursuit, Rogue and Misfits being the ones that are knocking on the door. This, to me, looks like a top 5 that many people would have predicted as we look at the bottom 5 now. Maybe Mad Lions, some people might have said they would have been a little bit higher in the standings, but still, they're still in the conversation here.
Yeah, I mean, we see sort of the middle tier, I guess, which I would say Mad Lions and XL. I was buying a lot of XL stock on our free agency show a few months ago. Because I was here, like, obviously Young Buck and Patrick and Norskaren, now named as Torre. But yeah, they're like, all those guys are really good, and I think that XL is particularly competitive. But Mad Lions has definitely been the surprise for me. No, I think because they did pick up a lot of good players. They knew what they were doing, and they built a team that they think can compete long-term rather than short. But overall, I think that when you look at Mad Lions and when you look at XL, it's going to be really interesting to see as we wind down the season who competes for that final playoff spot.
We'll talk to Emily Rand right now in Los Angeles. G2 2-0 this weekend against 2 opponents that were hot on their heels in the standings, able to defeat Origen, able to defeat Fnatic. When you look at their weekend, Emily, what impressed you the most?
I think, so previously I was the one who was like, yeah, like this is Fnatic's time. And I know LEC broadcast also talked about this as well, where you joke and you always think like, yeah, Fnatic's going to take over the standings now, and then G2 just kind of smacks them down. I think the thing everyone's probably going to want to talk about with G2 is the Janna top, which falls in line with a lot of things that Wonder's been doing earlier this split, running those support champions in the top lane. Due to support item changes that haven't gone through yet, they will on patch 10.5, I believe, but right now we're still on 10.4. So that is something that G2 also played around with really well. I think in the Origen series, Origen are kind of a team known for being pretty passive early, and despite some moves they made early, I'd say that's still the case, like early to mid game. G2, kind of took advantage of that, and I think if you're going to do that against G2 will take advantage of that, because some of their missteps usually happen in the early game, and where you see them recovering is definitely mid to late. Just based on, across the board, I feel like we haven't talked about it recently because we've kind of been really critical of some of the mistakes G2 have made thus far, but across the board, this is still just like an insane roster mechanically. Sure. Like just baseline level, this roster is nuts. And that's something that we don't necessarily bring up because, again, we've been super critical of G2. I think the other thing I really want to bring up about G2 outside of like some of their weird drafting that I already mentioned and the mechanical talent on this roster is that whenever a team like Fnatic, for example, we'll talk about them in a bit, but they tried to play more around Reckless by giving him a lot of the turret plates and swapping him and kind of saying that Bwipo was going to have a tough time against the Janna anyway. And I think G2 really showed that when they get some of these team compositions, they know how to do the right thing, even if they're making mistakes. So, like, we've been kind of critical of Caps since the role swap. He hasn't had as strong of a start as Perks. And again, like, that's kind of an unfair comparison, right? Because at the beginning of last year, I didn't expect Perks to step into that role as well and have them go on, like, a massive winning streak. I thought they were going to kind of fumble a bit in the beginning and then get better later on last spring, and that's not what happened. They actually just went on a win streak right away. So the comparison is a bit specious only because Perks is so talented. But we've been really critical of Caps and mistakes he's made in the bot lane, but he always does the right thing afterwards, right? And that's something I keep trying to bring up every week is like, even if he and Mickey get caught out due to, mispositioning too forward in lane and they were waiting in the brush and maybe you should have expected that, they're recovering. They're making plays on the other side of the map. They're pushing the wave in so it's still crashing into turret, right? So they're still doing all of these really great things. So when I think of G2, I also think of that, and that's another reason why their mid game is so strong. I mean, what do you guys think of when you think of G2 as a team now?
There's a very interesting comment in chat, actually, to that very point. Esports Bro says, it just feels right to have G2 at the top of EU, to which CPT replied, their playstyle and love for the game is inspirational. And that was said in the post-game lobby, actually, after the LEC broadcast. They said, hey, Carlos, if you tell your boys you want them to have fun, they're going to have some fun. And we've seen that in the top lane, definitely, with Wunder picking Soraka, then getting nerfed, Sona getting nerfed. Now Janna's probably going to get nerfed after those picks. What's the actually, I want to know what the record is for single-handedly being the cause for a champion being nerfed. How many champions? Wunder's at least.
I'm trying to think what player would even hold that title, right? Like,
I don't know how to calculate that, but Wunder has to be in the conversation at this point.
I think so, but I think the big thing, right, is not every team is able to afford what G2 are doing right now. To Emily's point, this is a team that when they were originally assembled, swap back for a second when Perks went bot lane and they picked up Caps, who was one of the best players in Fnatic in the mid lane at the time. They are afforded a lot of luxury by the fact that they do have some of the best players on their team, and the fact that they don't need a top laner who's playing Gangplank and other types of carry type champions, because they have other people on the map, including Jankos, who has historically been one of the most aggressive and aggressive carry junglers in all of Europe. They have the ability to put Wunder on a Janna or a Sona or a Soraka and just let him go nuts, right? And let him just be a support. Like, truthfully, the dude could probably be nominated for a support award, like the top or what is it called, the all LEC team for support. He could legitimately be on that. Not even joking, but like, yeah, I think at this point, like, they are afforded that luxury because they are some of the best players in the league. And I think to Emily's point about their sort of macro play is that, you know, League of Legends is a game of push and pull. Every time you push, you want to be able to pull as well. And the fact that when they make a mistake somewhere else on the map, they are very good about capitalizing it elsewhere, or trading a turret somewhere, or trading an objective and making very decisive calls. There's a level of trust that exists in this G2 esports team after a really successful 2019 that clearly does not exist in other teams in the LEC.
G2 are having fun. And it shows. Maybe in the middle of the split, you saw a little bit of cracks in the armor, but right now, based on what I'm hearing in interviews, based on what I'm seeing on the Rift, it looks like G2 is having fun. It might not be so fun trying to catch G2. Fnatic tried and failed this past weekend, but Fnatic still had a pretty decent weekend, and Reckless had a great game on Misfortune on Friday against SK, 9-0-4 KDA, remains undefeated at 4-0 with Misfortune. But Fnatic this weekend, did they show you enough, Emily, particularly against G2, that they can really contend come playoff time?
I actually think they should be able to. I'm still I'm not selling my Fnatic stock yet. I do think G2 once again proved why most people, prior to the season all of last year, considered them to be in a class of their own. But I think with Fnatic, given time, as we saw last year in some very close matches against G2, they should be able to adapt and recover and adjust. And I still really I know after the SK game, I tweeted, I low-key love Fnatic's comp here, because I really did. I liked the Lulu mid. I liked the Zac support. I know a lot of people might have not enjoyed this draft, but I actually really did. I still like the way that Fnatic had been using Nemesis, and I think one thing that G2 did really well is attacking some of those picks in draft with the Ornn. The Tristana is, in my opinion, less of a bot lane ban and maybe more of a mid lane ban. And I think Fnatic didn't look half bad against G2 either. I think they had a pretty strong understanding of how they wanted to play against G2, which wasn't, when we say attack the bot lane, you automatically think, oh, okay, Selfmade's going to be bot the entire time, and that's what's going to happen. And that's not actually what I thought of when I thought of how Fnatic attacked the bot lane, but I did think they did try to focus more on Reckless, especially with Bwipo stuck in that Janna matchup, which is very unfun for him. I'm sure he did not have a great time early. And I think they did a good job of rotating Reckless around, giving him a lot of turret plates. They had a strong approach to the early game, in my opinion. So I think the pieces for Fnatic are there, and it's just a matter of continuing to have those internal discussions of how they want to play, how they want to make the most of this team. And I mean, I do think there is a world where Fnatic can topple G2. I know we always like go back and forth between these teams, and when G2's struggling, we're like, okay, it's definitely going to be Fnatic, and now G2 just beat them, and we're like, okay, no one can touch G2. But again, similar to last year, I do think there's at the very least a world where we will see Fnatic going up against G2 and in a best of 5, and it will be remarkably close. Where do you guys think Fnatic are related to G2?
I will say this. I agree with who said this here. Hold on one second. It was Zarmak in chat. Bwipo is so good. He makes top lane look fun. I think he's my favorite player to watch in the LEC, honestly. He is consistently fun to watch, and he has consistently good performances.
Yeah, I mean, he is what you consider a top laner with a lot of flexibility and really someone who can perform at the highest level. To Emily's point, though, I think that Fnatic is going to be a contender, not just domestically, but when we reach the World Championship, if they continue in form, I think we can see another 2 League of Legends teams from Europe be very competitive among the fold, right? We've seen that in past years. Fnatic was in the World Championship 2 years ago. G2 was in the World Championship Finals 2 years ago. Sorry, and G2 was in the World Championship Finals this year. But they've also been very competitive generally, and I think that they will continue to be. This is a really strong region that at the very top, Europe looks like it is building world competitors, and it looks like they're going to continue to level up. The thing is with Fnatic, and this has always been Fnatic for some time now, has been that Reckless is the center of this team. You have to play around him. There are certain players that have left Fnatic because they don't like that fact that you have to play around Reckless. But that is how things work, and I think that we saw, particularly in the SK game, that is how you win games. And if you're G2, or if you're Origen, or if you're Rogue, what you have to do is shut him down, and you have to put him in the ground early to make it work. I think that that's the big thing, that's how you beat Fnatic, but that's also how Fnatic wins, is playing around Reckless. Not saying they don't have good, talented players. They certainly do. Bwipo is one of the best top laners in Europe.
Yes.
Selfmade is a really good jungler. Nemesis is a very good mid laner. Everyone on this team is an above average player, and that's why they are successful in a second place team in the league. But to win games, if you are Fnatic, you have to play around Reckless. That is your win condition.
I agree with 100 Talk K-Pod, or Talk Pod, pardon me, who says the most important thing about Bwipo is the hair. He's got a flow.
I've seen that man. I've seen that man in full tux, so he's stylish for a young guy.
Let's move on to Origen, the other team that's biting at the heels of G2 in the standings. They lost to G2, but they had an important win against Misfits, who are really in that third tier trying to jump up to the Fnatic and Origen level. And it was a big win against Misfits. Origen only lost 1 tower and 2 dragons in that game. Alfari, playing Renekton, went deathless.
I love the Renekton.
Most played. You know me. We play often. I'm always Renekton. I love Renekton. I'm a big Renekton guy. That and Set on the top lane. But his second most played champion in his career for Alfari there. Let's bring in Tyler Erzberger from Los Angeles to talk a little Origen. So let me pose the same question that I asked Emily of Fnatic. So when you saw what you saw out of Origen this weekend, are they a team to you that can really push in the playoffs?
So I've watched Origen. I've talked about Origen every week on Rift Rewind, and I think I finally have a theory or a method to their madness. I call it Origen is the cutoff for world-class teams. They are the line that separates the contenders for the World Championship and the pretenders. I think they are a world-class team, but they are at the very, very, right there. If they go a little bit worse, I think they are below a world-class team. So if you can beat Origen, you can win the Summoners Cup. You can make it to a final. You can contend with the best teams in the world. If you lose to them and their style, which is very slow and methodical, you're not going to do anything at Worlds. Nothing at the World stage. You will not make it out of groups at Worlds. If you can beat them, I can see you making it out Worlds. So this weekend, for a perfect example, Misfits, a lot of hype. I think they're a good team, but playing against Origen controlled the entire map, played their style, and whittled them down. Then you look against G2. G2 takes them out one by one, and it was simple scoops up for G2. So really, I think G2, world-class team, they can go on and contend for a world title. As we've seen, Misfits, not there just yet. Origen's right in that, they're really, really good, but I don't know if they can crack our top 5. So if you're below Origen in our power rankings, or if you lose to Origen, I don't think you're ready to contend for a world championship. You're still a pretender in my eyes.
Yeah, I think to that point where while I feel that Fnatic and Origen are sort of on the same level domestically, I do think that if you throw them against a Chinese team in particular, that Fnatic has a lot better chance than Origen. I think that there is a little degree of separation on the way that they play. Again, this Fnatic team's been on the world stage in mostly together before, right? for several years, but and the Origen team is relatively new. They're a newly established squad, so they're going to take a little bit of time to get that footing. But I do feel like even though that they can compete with each other on any given day in the LEC, I'm not necessarily sure that that would be the case for them competing against international teams. And I think that's the next step for Origen, is really sort of hunkering down on their playstyle and remaining consistent to the fact that they could match up well against other teams internationally.
So we're just going to keep talking League of
I'm
Legends.
thinking World Championship, man. Like,
You're thinking
all
World
in my brain.
Championship?
All in my brain. We're almost halfway through the season, so.
We're just going to keep talking, not acknowledge Tyler's haircut there.
You're looking good, Tyler.
Just the fresh
Thank
fade
you.
there. Look at that. Now, you know,
All thanks to Mr. Park. Thank you, Mr. Park.
now, just because you got your haircut doesn't mean you're exempt from getting your hair dyed at the end of the season when John Sun doesn't win MVP, right? You know that, right?
That was a bad decision. That was not a smart decision by me. That was bad.
Now
that
it
was
will
really
just
bad.
be short and dyed whatever hair color Obli would like to make. So.
Would it be a smart decision to pick Misfits or Rogue as a team that really contends in the second half of the spring split in the LEC, Tyler?
Give me Rogue. Love Rogue. I've always been on the Rogue bandwagon, and I will stick with them because when you look at a League of Legends team, you can teach a League of Legends team, you can teach them how to play the long game. You can teach them how to be better and tighter around objective control and warding and vision and how to play the map. You can teach those things. You cannot teach how to have one round KO power. You can't teach players have innate ability just to be mechanically skilled. Rogue has all that individual ability, and they are now learning how to play the map. They're learning how to play as a team. They're learning the little things that turns really good teams into world-class teams. So when you compare Rogue and Misfits, I think Misfits has a lot of potential, and maybe one day they can get up to that, stature of a world-class team. But I think right now, Rogue has that fastball. They have that knockout punch where when they get rolling, they can stomp any team in the world. They just have to tinker they have to, learn a little more, fine-tune some areas that they are weak in, and they will be up there with the Fnatics and the G2s of the world. I think Rogue has the most potential of any of these teams besides Fnatic and G2, who have already made it to a World Championship final. Rogue, I will stick with them till the end. I believe in Rogue. Rogue, please do not make me feel like an idiot when you fail.
So when you look at that, Hans Sama went deathless this weekend. Multiple Rogue players went deathless this weekend. Let's just ask the question, Emily, Misfits or Rogue? Is Misfits better than Rogue? Is Rogue better than Misfits? Which way are you leaning?
Right now, I'd still say, despite the fact that I'm about to go to bat for Misfits and talk about them a bit, I do think Rogue are a better team right now. I do also think that in their matches against Rogue, Misfits have had some draft missteps that unfortunately later on as the game played out helped decide the game. So that is kind of unfortunate because in their matches against Rogue, Misfits has definitely not looked as strong as them. What I do want to talk about when I talk about Misfits, though, because we spent a lot of time talking about Febivin on this team, I really want to talk about the progress that Razork and Denik are making because, especially Razork, I think he started off as a jungler in this LEC split, being compared to Shadow, who was initially performing better, and Razork was kind of having a few inty moments, some pretty bizarre pathing in his first few games, if I remember correctly. And he has shown up as a more consistent and like pretty strong jungler. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how these two players, specifically Razork and Denik, the jungle support duo, I really want to see how they can continue to improve. Because I know talking to Razork, the LEC broadcast actually talked to him after their match, and he brought up the fact that he himself is not sure if they're quite there yet. They're still a really emotional team. That's something that Febby talked about when he was on our show a few weeks ago, and something that they've continued to talk about as a team. So I appreciate the self-awareness from their young players. I always really like that when young players come out and they're just we have a lot of issues, but they have a ton of growth potential. And I think we've already seen some of that in Razork's pathing and continuing to improve with this team. So if they can, if that jungle support duo can continue on the trajectory that they've already been, I think it's a pretty strong future for Misfits going forward.
I will say this. I think that Rogue is the team that Misfits wants to be, meaning that they have a year on them in terms of this roster being together for an extra year period of time. So I think some of those emotional kinks that Emily was pointing out there that they've talked about, those are resolved within Rogue. Rogue seems very confident in themselves. They seem like they fit together quite well. And I think the turning point for Razork was the Echo game against G2 a few weeks ago, where he actually did start off quite poorly, actually. But I believe there was a bot lane dive that was really messed up and ended up killing everyone. But then it turned it around, and in team fighting he was playing well, and he was putting his parallel convergences in the right area, and he really sort of stepped it up. I think that was a big turning point for him, certainly a confidence boost when you are out jungling Jankos, who is considered probably the best jungler in Europe of all time. So certainly I think now, if you look at Rogue, they are the better team. I will agree with both Emily and Tyler in that regard. But I think that Misfits is getting there, and I think that give Misfits, if they are willing to stick together and play it out throughout Summer Split and maybe into next year, I think that they will continue to be a more competitive team. Razork and Denik have certainly impressed. Another reason that the LEC has shown that rookie talent does make their mark.
And you wrote an article about that.
I did about 3 months ago, yeah.
About how much rookie talent there was in the LEC versus the LCS, and what percentage of them started in that league and from the lower leagues, etc. That's available at ESPN.com/esports. Where am I looking? I'm looking right there. That's where I'm looking. ESPN.com/esports. Mad Lions. That is a team that I wonder whether we should give up on. I wonder, it's a team that's so hit and miss sometimes. Sometimes they look fabulous on the Rift. Other times they look like they wouldn't contend in the playoffs. Tyler, where do you land with Mad Lions?
I land where I feel like they should be. I think coming in the season, we all expected them to be one of the better rookie teams. We thought they would be the best rookie team. Obviously, Misfits has surprised everyone, but Mad Lions really has lived up to expectations, but in a different kind of way. Because I think when we came into the season, we were like, this team, these rookie superstars, Shadow and Karzi, they're going to take over the league with their fast play. But it really hasn't been the early game where they've been at their best. It's really been in the mid to late game where they've really snatch some victories from the jaws of defeat. When you have a young team like Rogue last year, you expect them to play fast and loose and have that aggressive early game style where they win lane, win game, but it's been flipped on its head kind of with Mad Lions, where a lot of their games, they are down early, they're down a few thousand gold, and they go into the mid game and late game on the back foot, but they know how to sneak out victories and kind of navigate these difficult terrains, and they're kind of a counter-punching team, which you don't usually expect from a young team. Usually young teams, they're fast and they're loose and they're dumb, but Mad Lions are kind of an intelligent team, and I feel like they're the inverse of Rogue, where Rogue is go, 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 and they're very win lane, win game, where Mad Lions are much more needing to learn how to play that early game and kind of, make a complete game. If they can get that early game going and they can get that chemistry in the early game of Shadow, who's been amazing late game, I think Mad Lions can contend for a top 5, top 4 spot in the summer. But I've been impressed by Mad Lions. They've lived up to expectations, and I'm very impressed by how they've played the mid and late game.
I would not give up on them, Arda. I don't think
you
that
would
we're.
not.
I don't think we're at that point yet, right? Like they are the youngest team in the LEC, I believe, based off their roster construction. I think that they have room to improve. I don't think they're going to make an international tournament this year. I don't think they're that good. But considering what they are, a team.
Wouldn't that be the definition of giving up on them, though? If they don't make an international tournament?
No, they are not in the same boat as Schalke and SK and Vitality.
Okay,
I've given up on those.
Okay.
I have no hope for any of those three teams.
Fair enough.
I do have hope for Mad Lions. I do think that they can. Again, them and XL are kind of in the same tier, in my opinion, to see who edges out for that playoff spot. But I certainly think that overall that this team can be competitive with the best of them, right? They've shown that they have been. So I would not completely give up on them. And I think that we certainly underrated them at the beginning of the season. We thought that they would be much worse than they actually have been. So it's impressive to see what they've been able to accomplish throughout the last couple of months.
You know who is not giving up on Mad Lions? Darren the Contrarian, who is in our chats, and he says, Mad Lions, why Arda, you shut your mouth when you're talking about Mad Lions. How about you get out of chat and enjoy your vacation? Chat, tell him why he shouldn't be in chat and he should be enjoying his time in South America right now. That's what he should be doing. But instead, he's here working. Don't work.
Yeah,
it's vacation
don't work.
time.
Don't work.
We
got you. We got you.
We are enjoying ourselves with Chad as well here on the Rift Rewind. This is an ESPN League of Legends program. We are live on Twitch, on the ESPN app, on Twitter, and on YouTube as well. We are monitoring Twitch chat, so if you want to be part of the conversation, you're watching on another platform, feel free to hop in our Twitch chat because we are constantly monitoring. It's right here. We are watching, and we will be asking your questions and your comments. Twitch is going live about Tyler's hair right now. You definitely, Tyler, you are not getting out of this one. I'm just telling you right now. Like, they're already making plans for you to like join Blue Man Group and stuff. Like, you have like a bunch of plans happening here.
It's not over yet.
Thank you,
Johnson can still be top 3. The season's not over yet. There's still 2 more weeks.
But
There's
top
2 weeks left.
3 was not the contention. Top 3, you said that
It
he
was
would
top
be the
3.
MVP.
It was top 3. It was top 3 MVP. It was top 3 MVP. He still has a chance. There's still a not great chance, not even a slightly okay chance.
I don't even know if he'll be the rookie of the split anymore.
All right, well, there is a good chance that we're going to talk about the LPL right now because we've seen some changes previously, and now we have a version of LPL back. So this is where all of our microphones are cut except for Emily Rand. So we're going to go to Emily in Los Angeles right now. Emily, give us a big update, a big preview, especially of the matches that have happened right now, of our new and revamped and revised LPL for this split.
Well, I think so. The first thing that we're going to talk about actually is how COVID-19 is still kind of impacting things, because I want to talk about EDG. EDG were actually a really smart team in terms of how they tried to get all of the players that they could past quarantine. So basically, when we're talking about having online matches, it's not like everyone's like loading up from their house. Most LPL teams still have bases in Shanghai, which I believe is where most of the teams have relocated their players, if possible. Now, the thing with EDG's roster going forward is that they're not going to be able to have JJ, Jinyu, Heart, or Clearlove. Heart and Clearlove are coaches. Clearlove has been sometimes streaming from Wuhan, but he is from the city where the virus originated, so he can't travel. And then all of these other players and coaches can't travel either. The big hit is the fact that 2 of them are EDG's junglers, and in my opinion, they're EDG's better junglers. So it's looking like if they can't, like they're definitely not going to be able, even if they flew these players out or got them to Shanghai like today, they'd have to go through the mandatory 14-day quarantine. So it's looking like Junja, which is their LMS sub-jungler that they'd picked up, is actually going to be their starting jungler, and that is going to impact the team significantly. They do have other top laners outside of Jinyu, but they don't have another jungler outside of Junja, and 2 of these players are junglers. So that's actually going to be really impactful, and we've already seen some of this impacting teams with JDG, who are unable. So in the Scrim League, they played with 705, and we were kind of wondering whether it was because they wanted to give 705 a chance to play, or whether he couldn't actually be with the team. And it's looking like whether Zoom couldn't actually be with the team. And it's looking like Zoom is unfortunately unable to be with the team, and that makes a difference because we saw them go up against FPX last night, and I was actually fully expecting JDG to take that match, despite the fact that Gimgoon was back in the top lane for FPX. And JDG are, like, in my opinion, Zoom is one of the best top laners in the world. He's in that conversation for sure. And if you have not seen this man play, he is phenomenal, like just insane top laner, probably one of the best tank players in the world. And so that is going to impact them going forward, because we saw them go up against FPX, a matchup I expected them to win, and they lost 1-2 to FPX, who, you know, look better now that Gimgoon is back in top lane. So, I mean, what do you guys think of all of these? I guess the COVID-19 EDG update is kind of the thing that everyone's talking about for LPL right now.
We've talked about coronavirus, COVID-19 on this program in the past, right? The 2 things that I want people to take away, and I'm sure that you already know this, is it stinks that it's happening, but it's the right call. No matter what alterations. We just heard news out of Italy, for example, walking into the ESPN headquarters about how they're canceling all Serie A soccer events and public gatherings, schools are closing, etc. Like, health measures are important. Of course this is going to happen. Of course it's going to continue to happen until we have a cure and things die down. So,
I mean, thankfully this is not true for all places in esports, but thankfully in certain places, in certain leagues, that there is enough stability on the internet to play games online at least a decently high level. I think that's the big question for me with the LPL is are we going to have parts of lag? China's a very big country. These players are having to play from home, right? In some instances, it's gets a little tricky, right?
Sure.
And so how will that impact their performance on the international stage and everything else come later in the year once COVID-19 clears out a little bit? So that's the big question for me.
So here's the thing, and obviously the LCK is impacted too, which is why we won't be talking so much about the LCK this week. Obviously coronavirus impacting that league as well with suspension of play. Here's the other thing. I know this goes without saying, but we have to give them, like, Riot and professional League of Legends competitive play, they're trying their best. This is an offering for the fans to be able to at least enjoy the LPL in some way, shape, or form, given the current situation. So even if there are some issues, some hiccups, some online concerns, maybe even some ping, some lag, whatever it is, we give them a pass in this situation. We enjoy what they are able to bring to us. We enjoy and appreciate the fact that at least an effort is being made. So
yeah, I mean, it's the biggest domestic esports regional league in the world. The LPL is bigger than anything else in esports that isn't international competition.
Right.
So I think that looking at it, like, at least it's there. Like, at least we get to see it because we didn't for a couple of weeks. So I'm glad to see something that's back.
And last night it was really cool because, like, they were doing the post-match interviews, and I retweeted some of the pictures, but it's basically like players either like in the home bases with masks on doing the interview in front of like a webcam, or teams posing together in a group and they all have masks on. Like there's one of FPX and there's another one of RNG, and their hair has grown so long that like you can barely see their face because it's like hair and then mask. But it's really interesting to see how teams have developed measures to continue on, right? Like you see the LPL casters, and they both have masks and they're in the studio with no audience broadcasting these games. Teams are doing like online fan meets and post-match interviews all online. So I think one of the more interesting things to see, especially with the way China has handled it, because they're the first to like go outside of PCS, which never started. China was the first to start, like go down and then come back up. And the way that they've developed some of these measures to still connect with fans and have like as normal of an LPL experience as possible is actually really like cool to see. Like it was really cool to see some of these post-match interviews and shots of players together and teams together in China.
I'm with Emily. Embrace it. Enjoy it for what it is. I wonder how much people are enjoying FPX, the reigning world champions, right now. Here's a question from a good friend of ours, and one of the only people in the world that will play Hearthstone Battlegrounds with me, Miles Yim. He's in the chat. Miles asks, Tyler, this one's for you, is FPX better with Gimgoon than Khan? Inquiring minds are wondering. What say you?
Thank you, Miles, because I was about to just get right into this. And FPX, it's Doinby and TN and Crisp and No. I salute Gimgoon, the real unsung hero of FPX. When I think of FPX, it's like a bunch of idiots. Think of, you're going out on a Friday night, they're gonna go party. These guys like to party. If you have 5 idiots going out on a Friday night and there's no one reliable there to make sure everyone gets home safely, it's gonna be a bad time. You might have some fun, but when it's around 2 a.m., 3 a.m., when you need that reliable person to get everyone back home, it's not gonna be fun if you have 5 idiots who don't know where they're going. Gimgoon is that reliable man. He is always there to clean up the messes of everyone else on the team. He's dutiful, he's diligent, and he is stalwart. He is always there for FPX when they need him. He will do all the dirty work. He will get camped. He will do every little thing that Doinby and everyone else on the team doesn't want to. He doesn't get enough credit. He doesn't get enough glory. They bring in Khan for millions. I don't care. Gimgoon is the heart of FPX. I salute Gimgoon. I love Gimgoon. Gimgoon is a real hero, and we should all be applauding Gimgoon for getting these 4 idiots victory after victory, because he is a real hero. Gimgoon, I salute you.
You know, Gimgoon is like a massive troll with the team as well, though, right? I'm just throwing that out there.
But he gets them. He does the dirty work.
If you ever look at their socials, I love the way they interact because they're all like super, super trolly. I do agree that having Gimgoon back on the lineup is actually super important to FPX's success. Initially, I thought that they'd be able to have Khan come in and just change Qian's pathing a bit so that Khan would get set in lane and then he could just go off on his own, but that is not what happened. They kind of over-focused him, and that takes away from what Doinby has to do, especially since his laning style kind of gives up a lot of resources with crashing multiple waves into the turret and no one to answer it. So I think it was cool to see FPX kind of like back in form. I will say another thing that I wanted to call out that they did really well is they also targeted Kanavi, who was like by far and away the biggest star in the Scrim League. Like he was just popping off, like absolutely going nuts. He's an insane player. He's one of the reasons why JDG are so good, and I think JDG are still good. It's just they're gonna really miss Zoom against these top teams like FPX. But they definitely targeted Kanavi a bit so that he had to go on his kind of signature pick of Kindred, and it didn't necessarily work as well as I think JDG would have liked.
Before we circle back to our next segment, right? I just want to go back to Tyler's anecdote. Tyler, is the anecdote of the idiots, is that personal? Like, were you pulling from like faint memory here? That was very detailed.
I'm not the Gimgoon of our group. Every good team needs a Gimgoon. I'm not the Gimgoon. I'm the TN or Doinby. I'm not the Gimgoon. On the Rift Rewind set, I am not the Gimgoon. You can decide who the real hero of the set is. Who's the real Gimgoon?
Okay, we do not need to give any fuel to chat to assign us players. Okay, Tyler, do not open that can of worms, man. Do
You
not.
guys better give me Tian or I'll kill you.
What's that, Emily?
You better make me Tian or I'll kill you.
Yeah, right? No, absolutely not. What I do want, though, is a 5 Idiots t-shirt. I do want that printed.
With Tyler on it.
Yeah, just 5 Tyler heads? That would be hilarious. I would wear that. I promise you, if that gets made somewhere somehow, I would absolutely wear that. We're going to try something new on the Rift Rewind, by the way. That was the worst segue ever, but whatever. This is the Rift Rewind, an ESPN League of Legends program. You're watching us on Twitch, you're watching us on YouTube, Twitter, and also the ESPN app. You notice we have 3 buckets here, okay? We noticed last week that you in Twitch chat enjoyed the fantasy booking. Fantasy League of Legends.
We have a lot of wrestling fans in
That's
chat,
right.
Right.
Region
like
versus region. You liked talking about teams in the LCS versus the LPL. You wanted to hear some analysis, a deep dive into perhaps an LEC squad taking on an LCK squad. So we have 3 buckets here. One of them LEC, one of them LCS, and one of them LPL. Here's how this is going to work. I'm going to ask Tyler, then Emily, then Jacob, and we're going to do this 3 times. To pick 2 regions. And then we are going to pick teams at random, create a fantasy matchup, and then we're going to debate it. That's what's going to happen right now. And in chat, you will spam the team you think will win. And if you want to give some reasoning, feel free. So Tyler, give me 2 regions right now. Let's go.
Give me LPL and NA.
All right, LPL and LCS. You want to have the honors?
I'll do my own. I'll let you do the honors.
Okay, I'm going to pick, this is very official. Okay, I will even close my eyes. All right, the LPL team is Fun Plus Phoenix, reigning champions.
Ooh.
Fun Plus Phoenix is our team in the LPL. In the LCS, ladies and
Which
gentlemen.
garbage fire will this be? I was on the money by calling it a garbage fire.
So,
hell yeah.
So, in the matchup of the world champions,
no.
Tyler, in the matchup of the world champions versus Pobelter, who do you got? And why?
All right. It's not over yet. Pobelter came in, he beat Team Liquid, who beat IG, who beat FPX once, All right, so for CLG to act...
I love that you're trying to do the math there. That's hilarious. Okay.
Okay. Oh, wow. No, yeah.
There's
So
Pobelter.
FPX... So for this to actually happen, CLG would need a lot of help. They would need to bring back their 2016 team of Darshan and Smithy, Stixay and Hui, Aframu. There's not really much of a chance here, but if there's one player I can believe in, it's Pobelter. Pobelter has been doubted his entire career. When they said he was too young to play League of Legends, he played League of Legends professionally at 13 years old. When they said North American mid laners couldn't make it to the World Championship, you know what Pobelter did? He made it to the World Championship on various teams. He beat TSM when no one thought CLG could beat TSM. Pobelter has made miracle after miracle after miracle his entire dang career. Pobelter was a jungler 3 weeks ago. He was nowhere. He replaced Crown, a world champion, in the mid lane. So if you want to doubt Pole Belter, go right ahead. I will not. Pole Belter and CLG would lose in 22 minutes.
Well, Emily, break down the Pobelter Doinb matchup.
Oh man,
no.
So I do think Pobelter would benefit from a lot of the resources that Doinb leaves on the table. But one of the things that is really difficult about calling like Doinb matchups is that Doinb, like, this team works so well for him, and he's played very similarly on all of his other teams, and they've been able to take advantage of it. So if it was like just Doinb, Pobelter in a vacuum, and Doinb was maybe on one of his older teams where there was a little bit of struggle between who was going to have the resources, and Doinb's constantly losing lane and messing up the mid wave, and you know, it's just giving resources to the enemy mid laner, I'd say like, yeah, okay, like maybe Pobelter wins in like the laning 1v1, but in terms of FPX and Doinb like together and how they play, that is just not a winnable matchup.
So,
this team plays so well with Doinb. Like, they know exactly how to play with a mid laner like him.
Chad is definitely behind FPX here, but interesting question from 100 Talk Pod. What if, Jacob, the matchup took place at Madison Square Garden? Does CLG get an even bigger advantage?
They get
Home
30
field.
minutes.
I just want to remind you
30-minute loss instead of 22.
I want to remind you what the last few League of Legends matches were at Madison Square Garden. It was SK Telecom T1 versus Rocks Tigers.
Yep, sure was.
And
great
Samsung
matchup.
Galaxy versus H2K. All which were competitive.
Yep.
This would not be anywhat competitive. If you were a Chinese League of Legends fan that lived in North America, you would have such a great time.
but
because
Pobelter
yeah.
then steamrolled.
But Pobelter has success with CLG at the Garden. No, you're like, nope.
No.
Okay.
No.
All right, we're going.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
no.
I would love to see this just to see Win get his ass kicked. Like, Win would just get rolled in the bot lane. Like, poor guy.
I'm looking for
Poor
like
guy.
sub 20 minutes, to be honest. Like, if Tian and Crisp
would
are
want-
unlocked and Doinb's unlocked, that's gonna be over.
Okay, Emily, pick 2 regions.
Oh man, I'm gonna go LEC and LPL. Let's see what I get.
LEC and LPL. Do you want to make these picks? You make these
No,
picks.
I'm gonna make my picks on my own. You do it for
Okay,
them.
fine. I'll pick
They're
mine.
gonna
Whatever,
get mad at
fine.
me for picking
All right,
something
LEC
stupid.
pick is.
This is gonna be weird, isn't it?
Our LEC pick is. Oh my gosh.
Oh no!
Have fun with that one. All right.
All
So
right.
we got.
Okay.
And do I even need to pick the LPL team? Like you can do analysis of any team, and you know it.
VG Gaming versus
And
Oh,
wait,
no.
I gotta set up a little more. All right, and I got FPX again. Let me pick a different team. Hang on.
I was gonna say take FPX out.
Yeah. We get JD Gaming.
Ooh.
So why does JD Gaming crush Vitality, Emily?
I mean, so this is like really, it's really hard to pick on Vitality because they've had like visa issues. So I feel bad.
Okay, fair enough.
I feel bad. I think, yeah, like, oof. I just,
That's all you have to say.
I
How
don't
long does the match
see how
last?
this is winnable even with Zoom out. Like, maybe, like, so if I'm a team and I'm looking at, okay, how do I attack JDG, right? I'll just go with that. I'll just go with, if I'm any team, in this case Vitality, how do I attack JD Gaming? Well, the first thing is that I try to make sure that their solo laners can't do anything. And I also employ a strategy similar to what I talked about with FPX, where you're trying to isolate Kanavi's picks. So you're putting him on, I mean, in this case it was the Kindred, which is a comfort pick for him, but didn't do much for JDG in the grand scheme of things. I still think actually Kanavi's really good on that pick, but individually. But I think you target Kanavi in jungle and you attack topside if it's 705, because honestly 705 kind of overperformed compared to what I thought of him in LDL play during the Scrim League. So with Zoom out, attack topside. Yagao is kind of hit or miss sometimes. And yeah, that's all I've got, honestly. I think JDG definitely takes this. I still think they're one of the best teams in the world.
I'm loving this segment. I'm loving this.
Great.
Okay, so
Great.
for the
Thank you,
third
Tyler.
one, actually, I'm going to ask chat to pick 2 regions. So spam the 2 regions you want picked. I am getting crucified for my picks, by the way. CLG and Vitality. Chat is not happy with my picks right now. Tyler, is there any world at all that you pick? Go the opposite way. Can you make the case the opposite way at all, Tyler?
The only way Vitality can beat JD Gaming is if it's an arm wrestling competition. That's all.
I wouldn't want to go up against like Yagao in an arm wrestling competition.
That's it. You're
Or
just
Konami.
That's the only chance.
some test
they
of
would
strength.
destroy me.
The only day that they'll win is Festivus. That's it. Feats of strength. That's the only way that they're going to win, huh, Tyler?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
You know, they can try though. They can try.
So chat is spamming NA and EU, so we're going to go with that.
All
and
right.
you're picking yours, Jacob. This is your matchup. So here's your LEC pick. All right. Our very random system here, by the way. Thank you, chat. Appreciate chat. Go ahead. And you got?
Origen.
Okay. Origin's a fair pick.
Yeah.
Origin's a fair pick. Fair pick.
I'm
Origin.
trying not to pick garbage dumpster fires.
And this
please.
is LCS. Origin is not bad. Good start. Good start,
Yeah.
chat. Good start. And now, and this will be the World's
Will we see
Finals
this one
matchup.
at Rift Rivals?
We're going to see this in World's Finals, obviously.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Hey!
Hey!
Okay. Have a debate. Let's see. Cloud9.
Oh,
And
so actually
Origen.
Darren had this debate a few weeks ago, did he not? Asking about how Cloud9 would fare in the LEC.
Sure.
I mean,
Did he use Origin as the cutoff, actually? Like,
think
did he
he
say
did.
that the Origin would be competitive, but every team above Origin would not be competitive? I mean, that's not too many teams, but I don't know. That's a good one.
that's a thinker. I think if I had to pick right now, I would pick Cloud9. I think that they're firing on all cylinders, that they are playing a playstyle that most of the North American teams are not. And I don't want to get complacent here for a while, right? Because when Team Liquid had their domination period in the LCS, we all thought that they were going to match up pretty well internationally. And while they did in certain instances, the World Championship begs to differ. So, looking at this, I would right now pick Cloud9, but I do think that Origen has the potential to be the better team long term. I think that really the big thing here that would be exciting for me is the jungle matchup, because you have 2 really good young junglers who, in their respective leagues, have made big names for themselves the past couple of years, and that they are some of the best in their role, respectively. But yeah, I would pick Cloud9 over Origen, but I don't think that that would be the same if we were talking about this 6 weeks from now.
What if this was, so we've been talking about this as if it was a best of 1. I wonder if it was a best of 3 or 5, Tyler. Do you think that the more games in the series would benefit Origin or Cloud9 in this one? I think Cloud9 might have an edge.
I would give Cloud9 the edge in a best of 1. I think a best of 5, it's a very close series. I think when it comes down to the matchup right now, just at this very moment, I think Xerxes and Blabber are pretty equal. I think they're both very good early game junglers. I think the edge for Cloud9 actually comes in the mid lane. Obviously, you know, Nisqy is European, so it's a bit of a cheat, you know, European beating a European team. But I think Nisqy right now, just him and his tandem with Blabber and their roaming style is so brilliant. And I think to beat Origen, you cannot let Alphari and Upset just get through the laning phase. If those two get through the laning phase on a Renekton, on a Raphelios, and they can just stay safe and get to that mid to late game, they will most likely win because they are a very good 5-on-5 team and they're very smart. So I think right now I would pick Cloud9 because I don't think Nisqy and Blabber would let either Alphari or Upset get to that late game and they would force the issue early. But in a best of 5, I think they're really good. I think this is probably the closest Europe versus NA match we could actually get.
I look forward to seeing it in World's Finals, Emily.
I disagree.
Oh, wow, big X. Okay, why, Emily? Why? Go ahead.
This
Last
is going
point
to
on this.
segue into nicely going forward, though, because we're going to talk about NA next. If you look at how TSM beat C9 this past weekend, I actually think Origen can do this, right? Like we're talking about how you have to kind of withstand C9's early game, and I actually disagree that Xerxes is an early game jungler, but that's putting that aside. I think that Origen can do this, right? Like they can team fight, they can scale. It's what people make fun of them for doing. So if they follow kind of a blueprint that TSM did this past week, they can beat C9.
Well, C9 was not successful in keeping their undefeated streak alive this split. F in the chat for the loss. TSM the benefactor. TSM had a great weekend. C9 still in first place, of course, but no longer undefeated. Tyler, what led to TSM's success against Cloud9 this past weekend?
It's a sad day. Every week on the Referee Pod, I've come here jovial, happy, excited, talking about all these records, how dominant C9 are. People on Twitter saying it's never going to be a perfect season. And then finally, it came to an end. And I think it's looking at TSM, and we've talked about TSM so many times on this show about how they're so inconsistently consistent, where it's either an 0-2, 2-0, 0-2, 2-0 week, that they've been experimenting a lot. And I think they finally found a method that works. And Bjergsen on his classic Zillion and going and playing for that top lane, because I think this team is really going towards the top lane with Broken Blade. They really believe in Broken Blade to be that carry, the ace of the team. And I think when you build around Broken Blade and you give him all the necessary resources to get ahead and actually beat the better teams in the world, and I think he's grown a lot. He looks kind of like the Broken Blade last year in the spring, where everyone was saying, oh, he's the next big thing, and then he had a big drop off in the summer. I'm just really excited to see how TSM can hopefully carry over the momentum, because if they look like this every week, they can go far at an international competition. This team could make a top 8, they could make a top 4, but it's all about consistency, because we know next week they can just roll into town and look terrible. We know TSM. We can't trust TSM. The only thing we can trust about TSM is that they're going to be inconsistent. So hopefully they can carry the momentum and look like the team I predicted to win the World Championship. So that'd be great.
We're going to get to Vulcan's tweet in a second here, but I do want to mention Broken Blade on set all weekend. Lights out. Incredible. And we saw glimpses of that in week 2 against Evil Geniuses, where he went 6-1-10 on set. He's even good against set. His Ornn on set was incredible as well. But he went 4-2-11 against C9, 2-2-8 against FlyQuest. But after the matchup, here's Vulcan. Lose is improved. Finally, we can get better. Here's the thing, Emily. I think one thing that we really should mention here about C9, and I think the tweet references this a little bit, is that when you get on a big win streak like that, oftentimes that might start to consume your thoughts, even if you're on that team. And people will continue to talk about it like we have on Rift Rewind. And then once it gets broken, it feels like a weight is off your shoulders. Because at the end of the day, C9 is still at the top of the tables. They're still going to make playoffs and probably clinch a playoff spot very, very soon. And they still are the favorites to win the spring split. So it's almost as if they have less stress now, even though they're not going to set a record per se and go 18-0.
Well, putting that aside, even so, talking about it from an analytical perspective, it's so much more difficult to study your weaknesses and your flaws if you're winning. Because if you are just, for example, smashing in lane, or you're smashing early in jungle, it's going to end up covering up a lot of weaknesses that your team still has. And I do think that, this C9 team isn't peerless. They do make mistakes. And what is separating them from maybe going toe-to-toe with a G2 or Fnatic or Origen, as we just talked about, in my opinion, is some of these little things that they can hopefully go back and really work on as a team. I think TSM, this is a trap, because every week I'm yeah, TSM, they're finally figuring it out. I love this TSM. I want to see the platonic ideal of TSM playing around top with, their bot lane kind of just soaking pressure until they're ready to play, and then they're going to 5v5 and it's going to be great. And then TSM always do badly after I talk well about them. So I think that I do really like what I saw from TSM, though, in this draft. Even though we know the Zillion is kind of a common pocket pick, I thought it was really great into Niski Zoe to help shutting him down and relying on Bjergsen for that. And then in their second match, I think we kind of just saw Bjergsen pop off on Aurelia, and that's really, it's something that you forget can happen. Bjergsen just kind of having a game like this. But it still can happen, and I really liked both sides of TSM I saw, so I'm breaking my own promise to myself, and now I'm sorry, TSM, because you're going to go 1-2 next week.
So I have 2 really small points to make about this, right? And I'll make the first one about C9 since they are the one behind us. So Cloud9, I agree. I think that when we've looked at teams and North American teams in the past, there is a little bit of complacency that comes with being so successful, whether that be Immortals teams of the past, Team Liquid teams of the past, even TSMs in the past. So I think that this is something that is, to Vulcan's point in that tweet, really important for them to grow as a team. This is a step that they need to figure out why they lost to TSM and really analyze it and move forward about how they would compete otherwise. Because we've seen teams be very successful in North America, have great records in North America, be such a cut above everyone else in the league, and then go to international stages and just get crushed. I'm not so sold on C9 being able to compete if they make it to MSI, or if there is an MSI, if that's the case. I'm not so sold that they would be able to hold their own against particularly the LPL and the LEC teams. But I think that overall, if looking at this, that this is the start. So I think that them losing is a big deal, and I think that Vulcan has the right mentality there on improving. The other part about TSM, though, is that they needed this confidence boost, probably more than anyone, right? They have been inconsistent, and we've said throughout the entire split, and we said this when this roster was initially constructed, that this is a team that succeeds when they're firing on all cylinders and when they're emotionally controlled and put together and composed, right? And so I think that beating C9, being the first person to take down the Giant within your league, is the step in the right direction. I think that with TSM moving forward, the victory over C9 will mean more for them than they can say moving forward through the next couple of weeks.
And victories for 100 Thieves, very important for them, going 2-0 this week as well. Here is a tweet from Papa Smithy regarding the week from 100 Thieves. It was a very good one for them. Papa Smithy, of course, the general manager of 100 Thieves, they achieved their first 2-0 week of the spring split. They had and here's the tweet right here. Super happy with today's game and the first 100 Thieves 2-0 weekend of 2020. Today showcased the things that we've been working on in practice. Thanks for the patience, 100 Thieves fans. Hope to continue to prove it was worth it. Papa Smithy, a great mind. We all know this. Him as a general manager is new. Certainly, this is still his first split. But as we take a look at the 100 Thieves KDA from this past weekend as well, Tyler, 100 Thieves impressed a lot of people this weekend. Do you think it's enough, though? Have they leapfrogged in your rankings? Do you see them as a better team now, or do you still think that there is some challenges in this squad?
I still think this team lives or dies by one man and one man only. His name is Someday. At his best, Someday is I don't even think there's an equal to him. I think he's the best top laner by far in North America when Sunday's on his game. People forget that it was only 2 years ago where I think many people said he was one of the top maybe 5 players in the entire world. It was him versus Smeb in South Korea. That was a big storyline of, you know, these two giants. He was an MVP in South Korea. And then he came over here and he found some success, then went to the academy last year, which was a disaster. You should never put Someday in academy. That was just silly. But finally, he's been given the chance to kind of have his own team. They're playing towards Someday. They know Someday's a win condition, and he's playing like it. And when you have a player like Someday who can just kind of be better than everyone else on the field, there's only a few of those players in the LCS, then you can go far. And I think for 100 Thieves as a whole, I think this was a very important weekend because it was the battle of the two people that Reddit wants DeMonte to replace. It was Ica versus Ryoma, the two players that everyone said, oh, why is DeMonte not starting? Why is Pole Belter not starting? Why are these two unknown players from, an outside region being started? And I think Ryoma, he held his own. He destroyed Ica, and I think he's improving. I think he's a 20-year-old kid. He has a lot of raw mechanical talent, and I think Papa Smithy sees that in him. I think he knows that in time, Ryoma can grow up to be one of the better mid laners in the league, similar to a Niski, who came over here as a young player on Envy. He had flashes of brilliance, but it's only been 2-3 years down the line where he's finally, peaked into that, superstar player that people thought he could become. So, good weekend for 100 Thieves and a good weekend for Ryoma.
So, 100 Thieves have a very, very tough week. Flashy actually mentioned it. What's up, Flashy? In the chat. C9 and FlyQuest next week. FlyQuest on Monday Night League. C9.
The true test.
Yeah. I mean, if there was ever a time to say, okay, 100 Thieves had a good week last week, 2-0, but now coming up, I mean, now show us what you got, right? With C9 and FlyQuest, who are battling for a top position and already in the top 3. Now let's see what 100 Thieves has got. Speaking of C9, this is a good question here. I'm going to throw it to you, actually, Jacob. From Mr. Roberti, who says, do you think TSM has the highest ceiling in the LCS? Obviously, Cloud9 is more consistent, but when they're playing their best, it looks like TSM's team fighting has been a step above everyone else's. What say you about that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that TSM does have the highest ceiling in the LCS. I would say that Bjergsen is still one of the best mid laners in the LCS, maybe even the best when he performs admirably, but he's been shaky this split. He's been shaky for a while. We've not seen the Bjergsen of old who was so much better, and I think that is because mid lane talent has improved a lot in North America. That to say, most of the mid laners in North America aren't actually North American. They are from other parts of the world. But nonetheless, I think that the competition's gotten a little bit more difficult for him. But I do think that Dardoch is still the star that we all want him to be. He has been marred and marred and marred by personality issues for so many years, and I think that when you have him be what he can be and show his true potential in a team that is that he is playing among other players that he can respect because they've been competitively successful in the past, that means a lot. The interesting thing about TSM to me, Broken Blade, everybody owes Broken Blade an apology. You would be surprised how many times I was asked this offseason, is Broken Blade being replaced? I don't think he needs to be. I actually think he's really good. He's really good.
He's been terrific,
yeah,
especially
he's been
on
great.
set.
He's been great. He understands the top lane meta right now, and he's plugged in. He gets it. The bottom lane for me is the real question. Kabe has been someone that I have been a long proponent of, being a big fan of for a long time in Europe. His days in Splice, and I think that, you know, seeing sort of what him and Biofrost can be together as a duo and how competitive they can be against the rest of the league, particularly Finn and Vulcan is a good comparison. That's the real question for TSM. But yes, I actually do think that TSM is going to be a team in the summer split that will be a lot better than they are now, and I think they're already pretty good right now.
Another question is, how good are Evil Geniuses? Another team that went 2-0 this past weekend. They defeated FlyQuest and CLG. CLG have a very big victory that we're going to talk about a little bit later on. But Emily, Evil Geniuses getting hot this week. What do you think? Is this for real, or do you think this is an off week and they just happen to stumble upon a 2-0 here?
So my problem with Evil Geniuses has always been that when I look at them, I'm like, okay, you have a bunch of talent on this team, and I have no idea how you're going to play. And previously, even in some of their wins, they seemed really not coordinated. A lot of the times one player would be going one way and another player would be going another way. I know people pointed it out the most whenever like Jizuke was in a side lane, but it wasn't just that. That was kind of just the most visible representation of that happening on this team. And I don't think those problems have been solved, but I like a few things that I've seen out of EG. First of all, they seem to have adopted the fasting Senna pretty well. Which I think is interesting because, you know, we've seen teams sometimes struggle how to play that, and I don't think they play it perfectly, but I do think they've had some success on it, and I actually really liked seeing the Rumble with the Senna, which didn't happen this week, it happened last week. But I really liked that adaptation. And this week we saw them use that against FlyQuest. The big thing for me with what is going to make EG successful is more steady performances from both of their solo laners. And I think we did get that this weekend with Kumo performing a bit better. He's kind of had, I think Kumo's a really talented player, but he definitely hasn't had the success right off the bat that maybe he wanted to, which I don't think he should be like super heavily criticized for, but he definitely is still adjusting to LCS stage play, I think. And this past weekend, we saw more glimpses of like kind of the potential and promise that Kumo might have. And then more consistent play from their mid lane, which Jizuke, whenever I think of him as a player with like really, really high highs and then really, really low lows and nothing in between. And it's kind of sometimes hard to have a mid laner like that, despite the fact that I think Jizuke is talented. And so going forward, if EG is to succeed, that's what I want to see, is like not even super strong performances from these players, but like more stable performances, if that makes sense.
Well, we've seen stable performances from Tactical on Team Liquid. However, Doublelift taking to Twitter and announcing that there will be a change at AD Carry. Here is his tweet right now. It simply says, "I'm back." And yes, this tweet did get posted after the loss to CLG. So he will presumably be starting tonight, and we will get to that a little bit later on, another TL Immortals matchup. And that there's a storyline there. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But this right here, I mean, what a whirlwind for the AD carry position. We've talked about it, and Tyler, you've made some really good points about it, about how Doublelift, you can't treat someone the stature of Doublelift, by keeping him on the sidelines for too long. But Tactical still had a good weekend. He was he still had a good weekend. If I can find my stats here, I'll read them in a second. But it was not a bad weekend for him. You can't point to the fact that he was the reason that they lost to CLG. But still, we see Doublelift being subbed in. Right move or not, Tyler?
It's obviously the right move. I mean, he's back, but he's also back to back to back to back. He's won TL 4 straight championships. People who are like, oh, he doesn't care, Doublelift doesn't care, oh, he's over it. That's ludicrous. I remember I talked to Doublelift back a few years ago after his sabbatical. He took a sabbatical to go stream, and he came back early to play for Team Liquid as a mercenary before going back to TSM. And I asked him, why? Why? You're making so much money. Are you making more money than you were, playing in the leagues? He's like, yeah. I could make so much more money streaming, a much more easier life. I could live with my girlfriend. I could have fun. I could just live and stream. But he's like, I can't be like that. I'm too competitive. I need that world championship. Anyone who thinks Doublelift doesn't dream every night of winning a world title and lifting in the air is ludicrous and doesn't know Doublelift. Sure. Oh, he doesn't care about spring. Who cares? Most players don't really care about spring. They just don't say it. They're just not honest like Doublelift. So, yes, Doublelift is back, and I'm excited to see him play because he deserves it, and he's going to go for number 5 this year on Team Liquid.
But Emily, Tactical, and I found the stats, by the way, thank you. A game where he had the most kills, CS, and the second highest KDA behind Core JJ on Team Liquid. Definitely not the reason Team Liquid lost that matchup. Is it too soon to make this swap, Emily?
I mean, the thing I can think of outside of like Doublelift's pedigree, which is in my opinion, not up for debate. The thing that they might be looking for from Doublelift is the voice, because he, everyone knows he has a very strong voice on all of his teams in comms. And again, when I talked about Team Liquid last week, I brought up the fact that I was like, I want to know who is calling the shots on this team without Doublelift on the lineup, because I've heard from multiple people that Broxa is a bit quieter, especially for a jungler, just because jungle is one of those roles that you expect to be very vocal, especially early. So is it Core calling the shots? Who is making a lot of the moves on this team? And so the only thing I can think of is that I don't think anyone should blame Tactical for their losses. But in terms of bringing Doublelift back in, I think one of the reasons why that could be the case is because they really want to have that super strong voice back in comms, so they have another really strong communicative voice.
Emily, we're going to stick with you on this one. You saw on the graphic there that Tactical had a 100% kill participation in the matchup against CLG. Well, on CLG, Pobelter has had a 76.6% KP across his 6 games and an impressive 3.1 KDA. My goodness, Pobelter has been phenomenal so far for CLG. How impressive has CLG been as a team, though, with Pobelter in there for you, Emily?
So I think the other thing is that, this CLG match was actually pretty close. Probably closer than either team would have liked if I'm looking at it. But the thing that everyone's talking about is this triple kill that Pobelter had on Syndra. And I think when people think of Pobelter, and he himself has spoken about this, he had one bad split, and then suddenly the, court of public opinion moved immediately against him. And this happens with a lot of North American players versus some other, especially North American mid laners, versus other players that people would like to bring over from Europe or other regions. And I think this is one of those moments where you kind of forget that Pobelter can still do stuff like this. And that's why it was so awesome to see it happen, was because, Pobelter can still do this. Yes, he's still someone that you're like, okay, he's always going to be at or around the top of NA in terms of mid lane performance for North American mid laners specifically. People always throw in that qualification. He's going to hold mid lane. He's not going to lose you the game. He might not necessarily win you the game. And in here, he actively kind of wins his team the game in a really crucial moment. And again, the game itself maybe shouldn't have come to this point. But I think it's really nice to be reminded that not only is Pobelter, like, oh, he's strong, he's steady, he's solid, like all these other adjectives, but it was really nice to just see him go off, Like, good for you, Pobe. I'm glad I got to see it.
Well, General Manager Tafo has been pretty busy. He brought in Pobelter and Stixay out, Wind in. Do you think, put yourself in Tafo's mind, like put us into the glimpse of the GM's mind. Do you think that there will be more changes, even if it's not immediate for this split? Do you think perhaps that we will see some more changes from CLG going into summer? Or do you think that they'll keep the chemistry here as they flow along, and perhaps this will be the team that we see going into summer for CLG?
There's not a single player on this team right now other than Pobelter that I could see who is safe. Every single one of them has been relatively inconsistent throughout the entirety of the split. I think that the one person I'm most intrigued to see sort of what happens to is Ruin. If Ruin can stay consistent, he will stay on this team. But I do think that he is, if anybody gets replaced, he's probably next up at bat. And I know that he's performed okay. I know that he's not necessarily the issue here, right? And clearly that they've done a little bit of an upswing since Pobelter joined the team replacing Crown. And Crown is now officially gone, by the way. It's not like he would come back. Right. He's no longer on CLG. But I do think that Ruin is really the big question mark for me, because when I look at the roles and the players that are available in said roles in the Academy Leagues, top lane is one that I actually think there are a couple different people there that could get their shot. So overall, I think that Ruin is the one that I would pay the most attention to see if he could potentially move. And when Crown moved off a little bit or a couple weeks ago and Pobelter came in, I definitely thought that Ruin could be up next to him.
Evil Jacob Wolf in the chat says Pogbelter. There you go. Thank you for joining us in the chat, by the way. This is the Rift Rewind, an ESPN League of Legends program. And now we're going to throw it to the Riot Desk to one of the best hosts out there, Latigris, the wonderful Latigris, and oh, by the way, Prawley and Marksy too.
Nah, it's just me, Arda, as you said. But okay, I guess I got to bring in. Yeah, go away. I need this whole desk. It's my space. Fine. But I think everybody does want to know a little bit about the game, so are you willing to help me out with that?
Of course.
Fine.
I love talking about League of Legends.
All right, then, let's talk some League of Legends. Our first matchup is the wonderful Immortals versus the fantabulous Team Liquid for their rematch. And it should shake out differently this time, right?
I think fantabulous might not be the correct
They all deserve
word
fancy adjectives.
Yeah, I think Immortals has been struggling a little bit. I think they're 1-5 in their last 6 or something like that. And so they are clearly kind of on the downward trajectory. Team Liquid is fluctuating a little bit, but I think it's like the slow fluctuation up. The things are improving.
Yeah, I think we were much more excited about Team Liquid before Saturday, and then they kind of had this like awkward game against CLG where like
forever.
They couldn't the forever nothing happening game, so they weren't actually able to like dominate. And that was a game we were looking at Team Liquid to be like, all right, they're on the rise. This should be a like crushing match, and they couldn't really deliver it then.
But this did come off of a couple of strong performances from them the week before. So how much does that really cause you to worry, the fact that the last game didn't go as well? And I mean, Pobelter was 1v9ing. So
I mean, it is like Team Liquid has been improving for sure. Brox has been looking a lot better, and they are best of ones. So I'm not going to completely dismiss them. But it was one of the moments where the casters or us on the desk were like hyping them up. So they lost. I think it might have been partially our fault.
Yeah, it was similar to TSM when TSM was on their 4-0 streak, and everyone's like, they're so good, and then they went 0-2 and looked terrible. That's kind of how that game felt to me out of Team Liquid, where it's like, I know they're not actually, bottom of the LCS territory, but I would like to see a little bit more consistency. Yes, Tactical was still playing in that game, and he did get taken advantage of a little bit in the early game against Thresh. He got hooked a couple times, and they dove it, but at the end of the day, that was a 48-minute game. They could have out-macroed. They had Victor in the side lanes at different points doing things. I know we were both kind of like, you can do more with that.
They're doing it.
Well, and they're facing off against Immortals, who I think when you look back at where their victories came from that were harder to judge early on, Golden Guardians, 100 Thieves, CLG, all of these struggling teams. What happens when Xmithy can't rely on I'm making the most of this tough situation and capitalizing upon the mistakes of the enemies?
I mean, he's a pretty smart guy. I think he doesn't have to rely on just punishing mistakes. Like he kind of like rose to prominence when he was like making these really creative jungle paths and like being able to deal with like being shut down in the early game and still coming back. So having this kind of strong mental. So I don't think he's completely reliant on it. I think that's just like one of his like big strengths he has. So I'm kind of looking at him to kind of return to that form where he's playing against Broxa again. I want to see him kind of like match up against him well and either shut him down or kind of keep himself in the game.
Yeah, and I think we haven't seen them able to have like a winning game plan in a little bit, let alone like a specific pick. They had the Camille that one time that went through split pushing messiness versus CLG, but then they tried it again versus 100 Thieves and got slapped around. So I'm still really confused on what 100 Thieves, Immortals want to do on a game-to-game basis. The only thing I can say is that Team Liquid game that just happened that went forever, those are the kinds of games Immortals find ways to win. So if they can somehow get into a similar game state against Team Liquid today and then out-macro them, I actually think that seems to be their best way forward.
For game number 2, is there anything that Golden Guardians can take from TSM's victory to add to their game plan?
I mean, I think they gotta at least look at it where, all right, playing around top has some value.
Yeah.
And then confidence in your team fighting abilities. I think if you walk into Cloud9 and you're not willing to fight, they're just gonna smash you. So I think you need to be able to pick a comp that can fight, and then once you get in that situation, just kind of close your eyes and throw your body at it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the mentality is important. We heard FlyQuest, we were talking to PoE one time, and Turtle one time, and he was talking about how they didn't think they were ready enough to fight with C9. And so you do have to have the mentality, but you also need to have the skill to actually execute on it, which I don't know how many teams have TSM's skill, because there were multiple top lane skirmishes that were, you know, fighting down to the last drop, people flashing in, last second ultimates coming on top. Like, not everyone has the skill to outplay C9 for the first 24 minutes, 25 minutes of the game, which is what you need.
Yeah, I guess that is a good caveat. Like, yeah, TSM did really well before the team fights started and then played the team fights well.
Right.
So yeah, it's not just pick team fights and go to toe-to-toe. You have to do a lot of things.
Can Cloud9 pick up anything, though, from the chinks in their armor after this defeat?
I think, I mean, I know Mark talked about it a lot where he liked Cloud9 kind of experimenting a bit with draft. I do think this is a bit of like maybe Cloud9 has to acknowledge, like, they take a lot of fights when they should be losing. Like, their composition isn't as strong, but because they're ahead in the game and they're making tempo so they can choose the fights and the other team is just not coordinated enough, they can win the fights where they kind of shouldn't. So maybe they can kind of check and be like, all right, we need to evaluate, like, if we can win this fight or not.
The defeat's not going to stop Cloud9 from trying to take that victory here today. So, just from LaTigris, not from Prolly, not from Mark Z, I head back to you, Arda, over with ESPN.
Thank you very much, Tigris. Probably and Mark Z, you guys are great. Mark Z is everywhere, by the way. He does every single piece of League content that exists. He's on every show.
He's going to be on 3 shows tonight. That's crazy.
Mark Z
craziness.
doesn't sleep.
Props.
Speaking of losing sleep because you're so excited about a matchup, this is the week that I wanted to see the first matchup between Broxa and Xmithy. Unfortunately, the first time they met, which was the first time that Broxa played in the LCS, he was still jet-lagged, he might have been sick, he hadn't scrimmed with the team a lot, but now he has had some time to gel and develop and get that chemistry going with Team Liquid. So now I consider this ground zero for this matchup between Xmithy and Broxa at jungle. Tyler, when you look at this matchup, how do you break it down?
Looking at this matchup, I think a few weeks ago we would have said Immortals had a chance, you know, this dysfunction of Team Liquid, but right now, my biggest thing with Immortals is always they don't play stupid. Their ceiling is very low, but they have a high floor, and I think that's being exposed the last few weeks, where they're not the most talented team in the league. They won games through their smarts and veteran leadership, and now playing the more mechanically gifted teams, they're getting, you know, trounced. And I think tonight we're going to see a very similar end result, where even if Team Liquid isn't perfectly in sync with Doublelift returning, I still believe that there's just so much talent on Team Liquid that Immortals' peak has already kind of, you know, been shot down, and I don't see a way, unless Doublelift kind of implodes and he has to play Senna and everything goes topsy-turvy, that Immortals is going to win. But you never bet against Xmithy, right? Xmithy can always pull a rabbit out of his hat. So for Immortals to win tonight, he's going to have to do just that.
Emily, do you think that Xmithy still has that Team Liquid harboring inside of him, that he really wants to beat this team? Or do you think that it was all over after he beat his team beat Team Liquid the first time around?
I mean, if I were him, I would still want to beat my former team, just as a really super competitive person. I can't speak for him, but I'll just throw that out there. I do think this matchup is going to come down to how each mid-jungle duo plays. I think that Jensen has a pretty large edge over Ica from what I've seen, and then I actually would give Xmithy the edge over Broxa right now still. So I think it is an interesting setup. But I also picked TL to win just because I think that in terms of where TL can be, they just have a lot more like pound for pound talent. I think if IMT are going to win this, it is going to be off of really smart decision making from both Xmithy early, especially with like his early jungle pathing and where he decides to attack, but also from Soaz, who is a player that I've always been really vocal about liking. Like, I love some of the calls he's made in game, like not only in his like previous history, but even here on IMT. So if IMT are going to win, it's going to be through that, but I picked TL.
See, Jacob, for me, if you look at it from a motivation standpoint, first of all, you have Xmithy, who already beat Team Liquid earlier this season. So it's not going to be, the fire's not going to be as bright because it's already happened. Yes, sure, he will want to beat his former team, and that will always be there, but not as bright as the first time, right? But then you have Broxa, who lost the first game, and now he has something to prove because he's still, that storyline is still in his head, and now he's operating at a higher rate. And then you have Doublelift, who's presumably extremely motivated now to get back in there, to get back at AD carry, and to prove that he cares about Spring and also that he's the Doublelift of old.
Yeah, I think that this Team Liquid team, there's a lot on the line here from a mental perspective of winning this game, right? And I do think that going back to Emily's point, I think really the big one to look at is what does Broxa play? Right, we've seen a lot of Lee Sin, and I think that that's the champion that I want to see him on again tonight because he needs to be able to impact the game early. He needs to be able to get people snowballing and rolling. And it's hard to do that with some of the champions that are in the meta. You see things like Sejuani that Xmithy likes to play and some of these others. And Xmithy needs to be able to counter that those early ganks and really sort of hand it to Team Liquid on his end. But I do think that putting Broxa on something that can let him dominate the jungle early is super important heading into this evening.
Emily, Cloud9, Golden Guardians. Can Golden Guardians pull this one out?
I actually really like what Golden Guardians are doing right now. I didn't pick them, but I really like what they've been doing thus far. I appreciate the Huhi edition as like one of North America's #1 Huhi apologists through the years in terms of the way he used to play mid lane. I think Huhi is just a really smart player, so I'm glad to see him back in LCS. But like jokes aside, I actually really do like Huhi. But jokes aside, I think that I'm still picking C9. I just think in terms of the way that C9 play, it's going to take a lot to topple them. The desk made a really good point that even though I focused more on how TSM tended to play their 5v5 team fights, part of that was, how they ended up playing out their early game and going toe-to-toe with C9, especially in some of those fights that C9 might pick that aren't really advantageous for them, but they've been getting away with. I don't think that Golden Guardians can do that just yet. Like, I still like what I saw from them earlier this week, but I still think that C9 has a pretty significant edge in this matchup.
Tyler, we were talking motivation earlier. Do you think that Golden Guardians are in the wrong place at the wrong time? Cloud9 just lost their first match of the split, and now they have something to prove, and it's going to be an absolute demolition as a result?
Well, this is interesting, isn't it, Arda? Because we talked about this early in the season when Sneaky left the team. It was when you win after win after win after win after win. It's easy to be fun and trolly and joke around, but you're only really tested as a true team when you get knocked down, right? And that was Sneaky's greatest gift to C9, is that when C9 got knocked down, Sneaky was right there to brush them off and say, it's okay guys, I got this, we can make this happen, we're gonna joke around, we're gonna keep this chill. Now with C9, they were full steam ahead, huge chip on their shoulder, no one on the team has an LCS championship. They've been knocked down, and yes, you'd expect them tonight to get back up, brush themselves off, and beat Golden Guardians around the Rift. But it's going to be very interesting to see how they respond without Sneaky, because Sneaky's greatest gift was never his play. He was always a very good player, but he was an amazing leader, and he was great at calming the teammates around him. So I'm really interested to see tonight how C9 responds without Sneaky after their loss.
So those are the thoughts from Tyler and Emily out in Los Angeles. Thank you to both of you for joining us here on the Rift Rewind as always. And they are here pretty much every single... Hey, you took my pen thing, Emily. No, I can't do it. My gimmick is stolen now. I can't do it anymore. I'm going to keep doing it. It's fine. All right, let's get to predictions. Let's show everybody what we all predicted, including Twitter. How did Twitter vote in terms of, well, it's a landslide both ways. Even Twitter said that Team Liquid and C9 will come out victorious. You know who would have opposite picks would be Darren the Contrarian. I bet you he would have picked.
I'm holding the seat warm right now for him.
Golden Guardians and Immortals. I bet you that he would have picked them. So those are our predictions. Feel free to debate them in the chat. You've been watching the Rift Rewind and ESPN League of Legends program on Twitch, the ESPN app, on Twitter, and YouTube. Any final thoughts, Jacob, on...
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get a chance to discuss, but I give no credence to the Cloud9 Golden Guardians game. I think that Cloud9's going to run that one over, but I am most interested by the Immortals and Team Liquid one because there are playoff implications on the line here pretty soon. So I think that both of these teams have a lot to prove tonight, and they have a lot to earn, and I think that's going to motivate a lot of people, aside from the fact that there are sort of some beefs there between the two teams, and Smithy and Doublelift now coming back as well. So I think that overall that is the match to watch tonight for me.
I'm telling you, motivation, folks. I'm telling you, Doublelift might have his best game of the split because he has something to prove. When was the last time, other than Worlds, right? Like this season, Doublelift really hasn't had anything to prove, right?
It hasn't really been since he got kicked off of TSM and got picked up by Team Liquid. That was it. That was it when he got replaced by Finn.
Yeah. Well, that'll do it for us here on the Rift Rewind. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you, Twitch chat, for interacting with us. We will do that every single week. Don't forget, Monday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, right here, the Rift Rewind. See you next week.